And good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Really appreciate you being with me. Now, hey, look, do not forget, we're still here, and we're still here. But I want you to take advantage of my absolutely fantastic 2-book special for the rest of this month. All right? Resurrection Feast Fulfilled, large work on the fulfillment of Sukkot, next to last, Shemini Atzeroth, Feast Day of Israel, and all things must be fulfilled. These books, if you go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, if you click on the banner up top, order them together, your total delivered price is $39.95. That's going to save you right at $15. All right? So take advantage of it. Because after all, we're talking about Israel's feast days here currently in my videos. And what I shared with you yesterday was absolutely critical to understand the importance of the issues before us. Jesus said, Matthew 5:17 and 18, "Do not think that I come to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy the law and the prophets, but to fulfill the law and the prophets." So Jesus said, "Not one jot, not one tittle shall pass from the law or the prophets until it is all fulfilled." So you can't go to Matthew chapter 5:17 and 18 and say, well, he was only talking about one little bitty aspect of the law, i.e. the Decalogue. He's talking about the prophets, inclusive. And you cannot isolate the law from itself. The law was considered, pardon me, don't know where that came from. The law was considered a comprehensive unit, a united unit. Were there different genres of literature? Yes, but it was all called the law. Throughout Scripture, throughout the New Testament, throughout even the Old, you have reference to the Psalms as the law. You have reference to the prophetic books as the law. And of course, you have Torah, the first 5 books, as the law, and you have the Decalogue referred to as the law. Now, you need to get a copy of my book, in addition to the 2 that I just mentioned. You need to get a copy of my book, The Passing of the Law of Moses, Torah to Telos, volume number 1. And what I really need to do is put together a package of my series on Torah to Telos, which is 5 volumes now. And I'll do that sometime in the near future. But anyway, be sure to get a copy of that book, The Passing of the Law of Moses, Torah to Telos, volume number 1, in which I prove what I just stated. In the Bible, the Old Covenant as a whole, the Old Testament as a whole, was called the law. Okay, as promised now, I want to share with you the fact that, as I've already noted, that from Pentecost onward, there was an expectation of the imminent judgment. Well, why is that important? Well, because from Pentecost until Yom Teruah was a period of time of 4 months. That's 120 days. That's a 3-fold multiplication of the perfect number 40. Now, I don't have time to go into this morning, ladies and gentlemen, but the number 40 is extremely critical in a study of the Bible. It is extremely important symbolically, not because it's literal 40 days, but it was a symbolic period of time. Well, 3 was a perfect number as well. So you have 120 days. 40 a perfect number, 3 a perfect number, multiplied together. So I am convinced that 4-month period that Jesus referred to in John chapter 4, verse 35. Do not say within yourselves, there are yet 4 months and then the harvest. For I say unto you, lift up your eyes, because the fields are already white unto harvest. Well, he's referring to the final 3 feast days, Sukkot specifically. So that period from Pentecost until Yom Teruah, the day or the Feast of Trumpet, was looked upon and called, as I have noted, and I point this out in my book. I document this, how the Jews called that period of time the time of waiting for the judgment. And so from Pentecost onward, in the New Testament, we find this constant reference. Again, after the day of Pentecost, we have this constant reference to the coming judgment. And the reason for that is very, very simple, because the Feast of Trumpet, the day of judgment, naturally followed closely the day of Pentecost. I've already shared with you from the book of Hebrews. I urged you yesterday to read the book of James and the book of 1 Peter. In the book of James, in the book of James, James is writing to the brethren who are being oppressed by the rich and the poor. They're being persecuted for their faith. They're being oppressed economically by the wealthy. And boy, the history books are full of the record of how the wealthy of the first century were oppressing their sharecroppers, as we would use the term today. Their tenants who took care of their fields, plowed, gathered. And they were supposed to be able to work off debt that way, but they always increasingly went further into debt because of the injustice and the cruelty of these landowners. And so James addresses the poor. And he says, does not God hear the cry of the laborers who cry out to him, out to the Lord of Sabaoth? Yes, he hears and will answer in the day of slaughter, which, by the way, takes us right back to Jeremiah chapter 12. The same thing was happening back then, and God brought judgment on Jerusalem for that very crime. So you have Jeremiah being cited by James. Jeremiah lamented the fact of the injustice toward the poor and said Jerusalem was going to fall for it in that generation, and it did. And you have James citing from Jeremiah about the same sins of the wealthy, promising them that their prayer had come up to the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth, the Lord of slaughter, is really what it's all about. He then urges his audience, be patient, therefore, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. Well, here they are suffering. And most commentators, they go there and you see, this is just a timeless, universal paranesis, exhortation to any laborer being unjustly used. Just be assured that one of these days, one of these millennia maybe, the Lord will come. So be patient until the coming of the Lord. Well, look, folks, if they're being oppressed and if they're being persecuted, perhaps even to death, then they're not going to be patient until the Lord comes. And he's not saying be patient until you die. He said, be patient, therefore, brethren, until the parousia. That's verse 6. And then in verse 8 he says, the parousia has drawn near. He is saying it is so urgently imminent that it's here. He used a perfect tense. And so, here is James talking about the coming of the Lord. Well, what's the coming of the Lord for? Judgment. And that's brought out in verse 9. as he has urged them to be patient until the coming of the Lord, to endure hardship as a faithful laborer in the field, waiting for the harvest, waiting for the end, because the coming of the Lord, the parousia of the Lord, had drawn near. And he's not talking about some spatial concept as opposed to temporality. In other words, he's not saying, just keep in mind the Lord's always around you, folks. As some former preterists are wanting to argue at the present time. But that's specious in James chapter 5. James 5 is not giving, again, some timeless exhortation to say, when you're being oppressed now by the unjust landowners, just keep in mind the Lord's always around you. No, it's not what it always saying at all. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, all Bible translations say, be patient, therefore, brethren, until the arrival or the coming of, until the presence of the Lord. It's simply wrong, therefore, to say, well, the Lord's always around us. No. James was expecting the arrival of the presence of the Lord. Now, look, this is just a little bit different twist. It's really synonymous, in my estimation, with the use of the Old Testament, in which time after time after time, Yahweh said he was going to come and that his presence would be with them. His face would be with them. In the Septuagint, it is the Greek word prosopon. Prosopon means presence. And more technically, more specifically, it means face or nose. Okay? So when God acted in judgment in the Old Covenant, his face came and was with them. And by the way, he could also drive them out from before his face, or he could draw them into his presence, depending on the circumstance. But do you see the point? Be patient, therefore, brethren, until. Well, if you're going to argue that the Lord is always present, then until doesn't make a bit of sense. The presence of the Lord in judgment was coming. The presence of the Lord has drawn near. It once was not there, so therefore it's wrong to say, well, the Lord's presence is always around us. You see, this gets back to the argumentum ad desperatum of the enemies of covenant eschatology, and I would even go so far as to say the enemies of the truth. When all you can do is to seek to destroy an entire vocabulary of temporal words in order to maintain your eschatology, then you are the enemy of the truth. I don't like to use such strong language, but what is it? To negate, to destroy, to mitigate, to obviate the Word of God. It just doesn't work. Okay, so from Pentecost until James was a period of relatively short time, and obviously this depends to a certain extent where you posit James. I believe that James was written in the late 50s, perhaps even as early, or the early 60s. But the point of fact is, from Pentecost until then, James is now saying, James chapter 5, verse 9, brethren, the judge is standing right at the door. Do you catch that? Now watch. Matthew chapter 24. Jesus is asked about the signs of his presence and of the end of the age. And he gave a couple of signs of that. This gospel shall be preached in all the world, then comes the end. The abomination of desolation would appear in Judea. And he told his apostles, do not believe anyone who says the time has drawn near before the signs appeared. Luke chapter 21, verse 8. Many will come in my name saying, I am he, and the time is drawn near. Do not believe them. But in Matthew chapter 24, verse 32, Jesus said, when you see all of these things begin to take place, then know that it, his parousia, his presence, it is nigh, even at the door. You see the signs, you know it's at the door. The parousia. James 5, the parousia has drawn near, the judge, the day of judgment, the fulfillment of trumpets. The judge is standing right at the door. Are we supposed to see any correlation here? If not, why not? And once again, that proves that the ceremonial feast days, Yom Teruah, was not nailed to the cross. It was about to be fulfilled, just like Colossians chapter 2:17 says. Okay? We got more. Read 1 Peter chapter 4 before we meet tomorrow, and I'll see you there.